What's up guys, welcome back to Core CSS Mastery. The topic of this lesson is CSS form limitations. Now so far, when styling forms, we've seen some elements that can be easily styled and configured. For example, text input and buttons. We've also seen some elements which are a bit trickier to style but still possible. For example, radio buttons and checkboxes. And one of the key concepts there is we had to set appearance property to none, so we can remove the default system styling. Finally, we get to a third class of form elements, which are essentially impossible to completely style. And one of those is the date input. Now, if I click on the date input, it's simply a date picker. We've all seen one of these. It allows us to pick a month, a year, and choose a specific date, which is then loaded up in the date picker. Now, some elements of this can be customized. For example, if I target this with the date ID selector, because this element has an ID of date, we could set background color to dark cyan. Great, that works. We could also control the outline. For example, with the pseudo class focus, we could set date, pseudo class of focus. We could set outline to solid 1 pixel dark cyan. And now when we select the element, we don't have that annoying blue border. But notice what happens when we click on the element. We have this date picker pop up. It's gray and orange. Why is it gray and orange? Unfortunately, that's just how it's loaded in the browser. We can't really do anything to style this. So imagine we have some kind of pink, light, airy theme for our site, and we click on the date picker, and we have this horrible dark and orange date picker. And what's worse is we don't really know how it's going to show up on different browsers. I'm assuming it's showing up this way because I'm using Firefox and I have dark mode enabled. So this is just the system theme or Firefox's theme for the date picker. Depending on which browser our user is using, they might get a completely different date picker, which is potentially going to clash with the color theme that we've carefully selected for our site. Now, this is by no means brand new information. It's something that's fairly well documented. For example, here on the Mozilla web docs, we have this heading, what can be done about the ugly elements? And we get examples of elements where we only have partial control over the styling. So check this out. We have a select box, HTML data list element. Again, we can't really style this in a drop-down box. Date time, we get to see a different way that this loads up, right? So within the context of this window, it's obviously loading up differently, but not necessarily tying in with the theme. We have the range element, color element. So the color picker, when it loads up, we don't necessarily have full control over the style of this color picker. It may depend on the browser. File browser, and also the subsequent display of the file information after it's been uploaded. HTML progress element and the HTML meter element. So what exactly is the solution here? Are we stuck with being forced to use certain stylings for these elements that we don't really want and don't really tie in with the theme of our page? It really depends how important the theme is. I mean, if you take this form, which we are styling with cyan colors at the moment, how big of a deal is it if the date picker that loads up is a completely different color from the rest of the theme? It's not going to affect a large percentage of the overall site. So the first question is, how much does it really matter? Because the other option, which does allow us to have full control of the styling, can potentially involve quite a bit of work. So we have to first think about this in terms of time investment, because there could be quite a bit of time invested in fixing this problem. And the end result is going to be you'll have a date picker which ties in more closely with your theme, but maybe you just don't care that much about this. It's not worth the extra work you have to put in. So what is the other option? Let's just say we want a date picker and it's really important for our branding that it ties in perfectly with the rest of the theme for the form. Well, in such cases, it's possible to create a completely custom element. And for that to be successful, it's likely going to be making heavy use of JavaScript. So as you can imagine, this is quite a bit more involved than just styling a HTML input tag. So we need to weigh up whether it's really worth it for us in our individual case. Having said this, there are quite a number of pre-existing JavaScript libraries which are specifically designed for helping to create custom form elements. So these can actually take a lot of the legwork out of the process. So So if you're not sure how to do that at this stage, I wouldn't worry too much. At the end of the day, this works. If I click on this date picker, I can choose a date. Just one of those things, if you need to get a site off the ground, style this as best as you can, make sure it's functional. You can always loop back to this at a later date and say, hey, can we actually fix the theming here for this date picker by using a custom component? But don't let something like this hold up your site launch, where it's like, okay, we're not inviting customers, we're not generating revenue because our date picker is gray when it should be dark cyan. That's not really a good reason to delay launch of a product, for example. So just accept that this is something that can be styled later. Just use a basic HTML element for now. Use the styling you can, and then loop back to this at a later date when you have the skills required to implement a custom form element. All right, thanks very much for watching, guys. Catch you in the next part of the course.